Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. I'm Den Haring, and today we're going to be talking about how to use markers and dye to make your lures, especially your soft plastic baits, look more realistic in the water. So if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know that I tend to use dyes and markers to make my baits match the hatch, so to speak, especially when it comes to fishing for bass and I'm on a bluegill bite where they're eating bluegill. I like to do certain things to make my bait resemble that bluegill a little bit better. But there's a lot of ways you can use markers. One of the more simple ways that I like to use is just red. I'll use a red permanent marker just to make what looks like gills on the bait. Simple as that. I don't do anything else. I'll just put red right around where the gills would be. It's just a little bit something that makes your bait stand out a little bit maybe from others, and it has that red on there. You know, if you ever catch a fish, if they open their gills, you notice that red. It's usually a deep blood red like this marker, and so I like to use that to get more strikes. Now, does it work? Does it get me more strikes? I don't know if it does or not. But if I believe that it does, it matters. In other words, if it makes you more confident in what you're doing, if it gives you more confidence to fish that bait, then you're gonna catch more fish on it. It's just how fishing works. It's a confidence game. If you believe in what you're doing, you're gonna catch a lot more fish than if you don't. So this is one of the reasons why I like to use these markers and these paint tips that I'm gonna show you, because it just helps me with my confidence and getting better results in my fish catching. So I've been doing this for a long time, and some ways of coloring these lures are easier and better than others. So I'd like to share with you what I've learned. Here's a bait that I did recently and just made it very subtle. This bait was the original color was called Smelt. It had like a dark gray back and a lighter belly. I added the red. And then you can see, hopefully you can notice this, there's just the slightest hint of chartreuse, just the slightest hint of that on this bait, especially towards the tail end. And that is there just to make it look a little bit more realistic to the fish. So I'll tend to use black to make little eye spots for eyeballs. If I'm trying to imitate a shad, I might put a black dot on the side of the bait. I like to use orange when I'm trying to imitate crawfish and sometimes perch or bluegills. Orange is a nice marker to have. But more often, and I'll sometimes use blue. Blue is another marker that I'll use to make a bait look more like a bluegill. But the thing I use the most, by far, is chartreuse. And you could use a chartreuse marker like this. This is called Spike It. This is dip and dye. You just dip it in there. And these are Spike It markers. The problem with the markers is that as soon as you really want or need to have that marker, it dries out on you and you go to apply it and you just can't get anything on your bait. It drives me crazy. So I always have the dip and glow. I don't like the smelly stuff. They have this in non-scent and they have it in garlic. This is unscented. I just prefer that. The garlic scent, I don't know what that does as far as fishing goes. It might mask your human scent a little bit, but it doesn't smell like anything a fish would normally eat anyway, so I don't worry about it. So, you know, when I'm using the dye, it's one thing to dip a tail, right? So oftentimes I'll just dip the tail in the dye. That's easy, right? Because all you gotta do is dip it in there maybe once or twice to get it on there real good if you want to really make it shine. But oftentimes I want to do more than that. Like on this beaver, I like to dip the tail, but I also like to just do the tips of these paddles that looks like fins when it's going through the water. And why do I do that? Well, the bluegills where I fish, almost all of them have what looks like a little bit of aqua glowing, like aqua chartreuse glow on their fins and their tails. And that, I really think, makes a big difference in the number of bites I get. I've tried it with and without, and if I'm fishing a bluegill bite, I'm always doing it with, because I've learned that I just get more bites that way. I think they see that, they see those tips, and it just triggers something in them that make them think that this thing is legitimate food, and they eat it. So this is why I like to do this. Well, I'm going to show you. You know, I used to use, what I would do sometimes with this is when my marker would dry out, I would try and dip my marker in there. Well, it don't fit in there. And then you have to tip the bottle and get the marker in. It's a little bit messy, but it works. You get some of this on the marker, and then you have direct control over when you're putting it on there, which is nice. The other thing that I used to do was I'd use a paintbrush. I'd just get a real small paintbrush, just a hobby paintbrush, and dip that in here and dip that on. And that worked really well too, including a toothpick. Sometimes I'd do it even with a toothpick to get a drop on there. The problem with the paintbrush is I always would tend to lose them. Somehow they would show up, they would end up in the corner of my boat somewhere or fall through a crack. Same thing with the darn toothbrushes. I can't find them anywhere, pain in the neck. So I ended up coming up with a better solution, using a dropper. It helps me save on the amount of dye, and it gives me good control when applying the dye to the bait. Let me show you how I use this. Take the dye, I'm going to open it up. And then I get the dropper, just a little bit of dye sucked up into there. That's all you need, just a little bit. I'll put a little bit on the tail right here. I don't even have to squeeze it, just press it on there. Got it on the tail, and then I can do these fins separately as well. Turn it over. There we go. Oops. And then I always squeeze the excess back into the bottle. Put the lid back on, and we're good to go. And you can see now I've got that marked up just where the tips and the fins have the dye. Don't have any on the main body of the bait. And so the dropper for me is quick and easy, and I tend not to lose it so much. It just fits right in the tackle box where I keep the dye itself. So now I've got a bait that's dyed up the way I want it. Sometimes I'll go lighter. I've made this pretty much so you could see it. I want you to be able to see the difference between the dye being on the bait and not having any dye. So, but sometimes I'll go much more subtler. I'll just do a little bit of a tip of the tail and of those little, whatever you want to call these little appendages on this bait. Well, that's it for this presentation. Just wanted to show you a couple of different ideas for coloring and marking up your baits. Hope you got something out of it. I would love to know what you do to color or mark your baits, if you feel it's important or not as well. If you feel that it's just nonsense and you don't do it, I'd like to know that. If you do use dyes and colors like this to make your baits look a little bit different or better than what's already out there, would love to know what your methods and techniques are for doing that. And if you'd like to see a unique video about how to fish a beaver a bit differently, take a look at this one. Until next time, hope to see you on the water. Be safe out there, and as always, may God bless your fishing endeavors.